The next film we're going to review is Lady Chatterley's Lover on Netflix. What did you think of the film?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I'd never heard much about the book, so I went into it not knowing what to expect, and it definitely wasn't what I was expecting. But I thought it was, yeah, I'd like to read the book now that I've watched the film, because I feel like I'll go into a lot more detail about maybe the more romantic side. I feel like the film focused quite a lot on their physical relationship and the
book does
the
as well,
romantic.
if I'm being honest.
I really, it's like the romantic story's there, but it's kind of secondary to the physical side. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good film. Yeah.
I liked it. It's not really my kind of film, but I liked it. The way they told the love story, I guess, was good. The way they portrayed certain things, good. And it was a good expression of love, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was better than the previous adaptation of the book. There was another film, I can't remember when it came out, a little while ago, that I didn't really think had anything, like, wasn't great. This one was better, I think. Again, like, missing a few social commentary points, but like, it's made for like a more modern audience, so I can see why. But yeah, no, I enjoyed it. I thought it was good.
No, I really liked the film. I think it's mostly to do with the setting, the acting, the accents, even the Derbyshire accent. In the book, they kind of made it a bit clearer, you know, about Derbyshire. And then, but you could hear Jack O'Connell's real accent because he was raised in Derbyshire, so he's kind of got a distinctive northern accent. And I just felt like it was just organic, and I kind of rooted for pretty much all the characters in different ways. And I love films where there's just a few characters and you just get to be with them for the whole 2 hours. And it didn't feel like a long 2 hours either. It's just it went by very quickly, which to me is probably the biggest measure of success of the film. And I do have to say, I just think it was very well done, like the twinkly kind of piano music and the sex scenes, I think, were very either artfully done or just a bit more raw and animalistic, and I just felt like everything worked really well.
Yeah, I think it's important that, even though, like, might have been a slightly intense watch if you're watching it in the library, as somebody definitely was, I liked the fact it wasn't like really cinematic, like soft lighting, like fading away to black, like even though it was very intense, like seeing the actual like full-on sex scenes. I think it was really important because that's kind of like what the novel was about. It's not about like it kind of is a romance story, but it's not about like the soft romance that all these romantic novels always portray. It was literally like women can have sexual attraction to men and they want sex as well. And I think that was what the book was originally aiming to get at, which is why it was like banned and why it was so controversial back at the time, because it was really solely focused on female like empowerment and female pleasure. And I think they did that really well in this film as well, by showing that like it was Connie, the main character's like desire to sleep with this guy, and she instigated it, and she like wanted him, rather than it being like she's been taken advantage of, which I think the original film kind of, obviously didn't really, but kind of hinted at. Whereas I think they've done really well by showing the raw organic sex scenes. I think it had to be done because it was like, this is what it's actually like, this like desires animalistic like sex. I think it's really important that they showed that, and showed that it was coming from the female character.
I agree, because the way they showed Connie in the like first half an hour, like you sensed like she was trapped in this in her world, and she had no escape. And it was, yeah, I agree with you. It was a good way to sort of show like, alright, she's breaking out of this cage, and this is how she's doing it. And yeah, I thought it was good how they showed like this raw energy, and yeah, I really liked that part of it.
I feel like you also really get the kind of disgust she feels with her husband as well. Like the way he's portrayed is comes across like not really well, but like you can really feel like how she'd feel in that position, like when she's trying to help him into the bath, and he's like he's never kind to her or thankful. Like he kind of just assumes she'll always be there, to always be at his beck and call, and just do what he wants her to do without like anything in return. And like when her friend comes to visit and realises that she's actually like really ill and her husband hasn't noticed, like I feel like you just feel quite repulsed with the husband, like as the film goes on, and you kind of like understand why she does like what she does, like
at first I think it is interesting, because having read the book just before it, I felt like the husband was this interesting contradiction of liberal and conservative. So he really wants to. They didn't really make a huge deal out of this, but he's like a novelist and he writes celebrity novels, and they're not the best novels in the world. They're a bit pulp, but he has his success fair to him. He's almost an empowering, in a way, example of disability. He's become a great writer instead as being aristocratic. It is kind of groundbreaking as well to show, for its time, a disabled character, wealth, status, and that is due to World War One. And I think it's just a brilliant film for kind of just exploring the aftermath of World War One, and that's the whole film is actually about the aftermath of the war, and it's women's kind of position at the time is so in flux, and I would love watching the film when you could just see, are women going to return to conventionality and just tradition and normal? Are they going to move on and progress? Mm. And you can see that with Connie, and it is whether she is just going to accept her fate. Because to be fair, she's got a very good deal for herself, being married and being so wealthy, but it just shows you that wealth isn't everything.
I think, go back to your original point, you covered a lot of bases there. I think the Clifford's character is really, really good, really well done, because before the war, and as you were saying, the war is really important in the film, even though it doesn't play a major role, because he was nice. When they first got married, he was lovely to her. He was asking whether she wants a family, and it seemed like a very sort of, maybe a little bit static, because that relationships kind of were in those days. You got married before you really even knew the person, but almost a very loving relationship, or had a lot of potential. And then I think the fact that he changed so much, obviously because of his disability as well, but also because of the potential PTSD of the war. Yeah. He very subtly changed, and I think it was very well acted from. I don't know who the actor was, but he did a very good job at subtly changing, because he didn't turn into a completely horrible person, and it showed that he was still himself deep down. But he was playing against his trauma from the war, how he was raised as a gentleman, not to care about people below him, and it was very well done, I thought. Yeah.
It's really, is he in the wrong for what he's at? Because he said to her, you can have an affair, which was kind of, I thought, very progressive liberal. Very, yeah. So you can have children, and we can have children, we'll just lie and it'll all be fine, go to Venice. And it isn't, to me, that isn't the world's biggest ask, personally, from a husband, especially of that time. But at the same time, it does show you why love isn't about. This is why I do think they really did fall in love. In that, I think Connie would have just stuck with that plan if she hadn't fallen in love. It's really not that difficult a plan to do. She would have had a child, which she really wanted, and it just shows you that she actually did fall in love, and that love is. It is that really bad cliche, but love is for cheating, not sex. He said as well in the film, I think the book worded it differently. He was like, but don't fall in love. He wants that love, he wants that marriage. So really, it's a film where we're on the side of the woman who cheats, and we're on her side, and we're like, come on, cheat, leave him. And she doesn't come from nothing, but everything she has is because of her marriage. The gamekeepers because of her marriage, and yet we still are on her side. It's great. It's a great bit of writing.
Yeah, it really makes you think, and it is a really interesting film. And I think maybe because the main character is a woman, it's kind of more acceptable, which sounds awful and obviously not okay in today's society. But because the way that women were just made to sort of marry whoever, had money and status, and obviously she was lucky because to start with, Clifford was a really nice guy. It seemed like. But because of what we know from women in history, they had quite a raw deal. So when she actually fell in love, we were really encouraging it. And then only at the end I was when she was you have to let me go, and then she left, and Clifford just started crying. I was obviously he has been really bitter and not very nice and paying attention, but he's got his own demons, and I was I feel a bit bad. I was leave him! Yeah, rooting her on, and that. So it's a lot more complex than I think just a love story. It's you feel for all of the characters, which I think is important. If
he wasn't disabled, Clifford, I think the audience, rightly or wrongly, pities him for it. So then you wouldn't feel sympathy for him, at the end. But it is because he is trapped himself, and he is a victim. despite his class. But really, I think the film does show that upper class people, working class people, the book did this better, are all victims of the class system. And that was kind of almost a very scandalous thing to say, because there's this great quote in the book where it's, I think it's Clifford admitting to himself that the reason why he has all this success with his writing is because of his birthplace, and that he's a mediocre writer, and anyone else. And I think I just love that, because it's an anti-American dream. It's kind of just like, that is the British reality, that people in upper class backgrounds, even today with journalism, media, law, judges, they all privately educated. And
but it's the way Connie's sister, when she met the gatekeeper, I forgot his name.
Mella?
The gamekeeper.
Yeah, gamekeeper.
Yeah, Oliver.
Yeah. When she met him the first time, I was like, oh, like if you go through with this to Connie, like what have you got? Like I think about this, like you'll have no money, or like you'll have no life, you'll get no job. Like think about this, and it's kind of like, well, that's not the be all and end all. Like I'm sure they would have got through, and I'm sure they will get through eventually. But it was kind of like, yeah, that sort of highlights that in the overall feelings like towards like the upper class versus working class side of it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess you could argue like the middle class have the most to lose, because they don't want to be working class. They're working so hard to be upper class, and they are struggling themselves. And then the upper class, they're like, we're not actually that rich, we're broke, World War I's been bad for us. And they kind of did that in the film briefly. They were saying about the estate struggling a few times, but you would have got that impression by the end of the film. And you kind of do see that actually he has a lot of people to provide for on the estate. It's just, I think you could just see by the end of the film, like, yeah, there's not going to be many estates like this in the future, where there's like one lord of a manor and everyone else just works around him in a little village. You can see it's already getting outdated even back then.
Yeah, I think a scene, sorry, kind of unrelated, a scene that I thought was really well done, maybe a little bit obvious, but I really liked, was when one of the first times she went to the little house in the woods and saw the gamekeeper, Oliver, and it was when the pheasants or quails were born, and she was trying to pick one up and she couldn't, and then he picked one up and gave it to her. And like, this might be me reading too much into it, but I thought it kind of foreshadowed that he was going to give her a child, but like give her a child.
Yes.
Because like it was literally it was kind of obvious, but like such a metaphor for her not being able to have one, and then he was like, I'll give you one, and he did it in such a caring manner. And I think that was really interesting, because then it's like, oh yeah, here he is providing her with birth and life and stuff, like the baby, but also the way he did it, like handed it to her, was so loving and so caring. It also hinted that the way in which he's going to like make her pregnant is going to be through love.
I kind of like that as well, because that was the moment as well when they first, I guess, when they kind
hit
of
it off.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, I really enjoyed that scene as well. And yeah, I didn't really look at it in that way, but I agree with you. Like, I definitely, that's the way that kind of played out, I guess. I agree.
For me, it was just like a microcosm for like the wider goings on within the film. I was like, right, okay, so that's kind of hinting at what's going to happen, and her struggling to pick up a chick. Also, it was just a really cute.
It was a really well done, like, metaphor. It was really well done.
I thought that scene was very good, very well acted. I thought there was a few scenes like that where I was like, it's really nicely done.
I liked the scene where she wore her red dress, and she wore a crochet dress, and she like walked through the streets, and it was all grey. They had a blue filter on the film, and I think they had a grey filter perhaps for that scene, and you could just see, I just felt like it was so realistic, because to me it was like she was a bird in a gilded cage. That was the other metaphor. So she had the beautiful clothes, and she was like the unhappiest person in the village.
It was
and
like,
she's
here
the
she
most
was,
privileged,
this colourful, beautiful bird that people can look at, people can see.
She's the most privileged, and she's the most unhappy. And it was interesting, the ladies at the end and the servants were just happy that she was happy. That was the most powerful bit of the film.
I was going to say, I'd quite like to talk about it in again, going very deep, but like the feminist architecture of the whole film was fantastic, because obviously it was directed by a woman, and I think you could really tell that, because it was like female pleasure, female empowerment through the sex, but also through like the housekeeper character, I think it's Mrs. Bolton, supporting another lady, especially at the end when they're all supporting her. And I think it was just so nice to see women supporting women, and then the way it was directed, it was like all about not just the sex, but like women having fun and like being in the rain and enjoying life, rather than just having the female character as like an attractive object, which some romance, especially period dramas, like films and stuff, do. And it's all about like just like the lust and stuff. But it was nice to actually see her enjoying herself.
It was nice the way the sister kind of backed up when she found out about Connie's was like a bit depressed, and the way the sister kind of backed her up and was like to Clifford like hey, you need to like make sure Connie has time for herself, and just like, you know, like think about her, like no, it's not just about you.
It could have been easy for her to be a victim and just kind of let everything happen to her and just become like a subservient like housewife who looks after her husband and has a couple of maids and like that's her life, but she never really feels like the victim. Like, there's a couple of scenes where you feel bad for her, but you don't really feel like you're always rooting for her, but you don't feel like she's a victim and she's like a lost cause and she's just going to let things stay how they are. Like, she's always like trying to make things better for herself, going out, meeting up with this guy, or like when she's desperate to get a like maid hired to look after Clifford. Like, she's someone you really are just rooting for the whole way through.
I think her redemption is that she is not classist and she's not prejudicial, whereas Clifford is. And that is the main difference between those two characters, is that she is almost enables herself not to be a victim because she has empathy and she has to come in touch with other people. So she's always like, how dare you think that about other people? We're not any better than them. They have their own issues. They have problems. It's actually our duty to look after other people. She's got a strong moral compass. That's the opposite of Clifford. And I think Clifford is one of those people who just wavers about from flickering, from having that certainty and conviction that actually we're all humanity, and then he reverts into his childish snobbery. But it's realistic. People do that even.
I kind of like the interaction they have when Clifford is in the wheelchair, like you're trying to get up the hill but you can't quite make it. And then Oliver kind of helps along, and then he points out that his lungs are like that he can't like really do exercise quite well. It's just like from the war. I like that interaction between them two to kind of acknowledge that they both kind of have been suffering as a result of the war. And I kind of wish that they kind of, I guess, had that one interaction to show that they have something in common, and they have something that unites them instead of just like it's kind of like afterwards Clifford's kind of a bit like, oh, so what towards him, and a bit like, well, whatever. And I kind of wish that was just one interaction they had that just shows that kind of like connection.
It's a character regression, so the plot actually makes sense at the end. Because if Clifford became a better character, he would actually be okay with the affair. You know, and they'd all live together. No, but he would stay in the cottage and all that, and there'd be a different ending. You know, if Clifford redeemed himself. So I kind of think Clifford has to not redeem himself, and he has to kind of be divisive and pick out differences between him and other people, which is kind of a shame. But I think it would be nice, you know, to have an ending where Clifford is. But Clifford, his acting was so good that you could kind of tell he regretted it. He isn't. His heart's not in it. His heart's not in his prejudice. It's not deeply ingrained in his bones like some characters are, and they believe it from birth and they'll never not believe it. He is more like, he just says it as like a lazy thing, and he's bitter and he's just a bit jealous and he's just a bit.
Just a cultural thing as well. So like if you were raised back in the day as an upper class gentleman, you were told everything from birth that you are superior to these people, and it would take masses to overdo that. Like, we've been trying to in society overcome people's prejudices for years. Like, it's hard. Like, so I think for his character he was fairly progressive. It just wasn't enough. It's a shame. It
also shows that it's a similar thing they do at the end of World War II with Inspector Calls. Some characters overcome their prejudices because of the war, some don't. They're kind of showing that society and the population in general. Some people sees the 1920s as a breaking down of barriers, and then other people, like Clifford, remain conservative perhaps in their outlook. I really did you. And Venice, I think the other great thing about the film and the book And I remember reading the book, and it was like, when's Venice going to happen? Let's go to Venice.
Yeah.
And then they keep delaying Venice. So you kind of got that anticipation and tension of Venice. And that worked so well.
What's interesting about the film, I don't know that it's good or bad, is that the book obviously was about the love and sex and stuff, but had a lot more to it. And I think that is hinted at in the film, and you could tell there's like social commentaries and stuff, but the film is very just heavy on all the sex scenes. And like so is the book, but I guess because it's so much longer, there's so much more in it. And I think I'd just like to get people's opinions on whether like there was too much of that in the in the second half. It was quite nice because they got to know each other and you saw them having fun and laughing, and I think that was really important. Because in the first like few times they met, I was like, this is just about sex, where it's not in the film. In the book, because I think it was nice that they developed on that later on.
I think a few times it happened was a bit unnecessary, but then, like you said, each time they did have sex, like you kind of saw Connie sort of come out of her shell a bit, and afterwards when she will sort of walk back to the like a manor, I guess, or something.
Yeah, like the gate.
Yeah, gate, and it's like you sort of see her like be more confident, a bit more like happy, and a bit more, and I quite like that. But yeah, it was a bit maybe a bit too much, but I'd say more often than not it developed into something more.
Yeah.
I think it's probably because I wasn't expecting it. Like I had no idea what to expect, so that's kind of was a bit of a shock at first, I guess. But I don't think overall there was too much. I think when you're watching it, you're like, oh my god, like this is a lot. But then, like looking back in hindsight now, I'm like, there was a lot of sex scenes, but like you say, they kind of progressed into character development or the story development. Like they weren't just there. Then you watched it and you're like, why do they need to?
So you
like,
think they actually had like a nice relationship by the end of it?
Yeah.
Because I think to start with, I was like, they didn't know each other. And then she said the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, thank you, Connie. But I just want to pick on one thing that you said, which again, another metaphor. I'm constantly finding metaphors, but with when he would always walk her to the gate, and there was like the whole fence round. I thought that was just a really nice way of like such a clear visual division between like her happy, free, sexual, like liberated life, and then who she's supposed to be. So it was like a nice line clearly between who she's supposed to be and who she wants to be, and then like upper class, lower class. It was like a big visual divide between so many different things.
I think the worst bit of the film for me was when she changed her haircut, because I liked it when she had that romantic. She had this very much like Victorian romantic. You know, she was the naked. You know, when she was, it was like a painting. You know, when she was naked in the rain with her long hair.
Yeah.
It was like a Victorian painting. She looked like, do you know, Ophelia or whatever.
Like
a Rembrandt kind of romantic, and that was nature. You know, that movement loved nature. So their relationship with the chicken, you know, the quails, are very much in nature. So she was this kind of like nymph, this long-haired, elven, very beautiful woman, and he was of nature too. So then it was kind of interesting in the end when she changed her hair, and to me that kind of symbolised the 1920s. You know, like short haircut as well was the era. So she comes back and she kind of she looked like such a different person without the long hair, with like the loose hair. Even when she, when she just came back with kind of I don't think it looked as nice, but that wasn't the point of the film. It was kind of more.
Really?
No, the point of the film was more she was this painter. She was romantic. She had that. Let's go back to nature. The only things that matter in life are like the bread and food on the table, which is kind of this kind of hippie now, but back then it was like the romantic era of things. And the gamekeeper fit with it, but the other guy was just like, we need money. Clifford was like, we need money, we need capitalism, we need to actually, instead of, the book had so many conversations about socialism, but this was more like, very briefly, do I need to think about money and just career and industrialisation, or can I just have a simple life? And we all understand that in the end, as she chose a simple life, and other characters really, really hated that, but that's because they have stuff to lose as middle class characters, whereas the working class characters, it's like, really, why are you still there? What's keeping you? What's keeping you there? Like fear, economic poverty, and other worries. To me, the sex scenes were very beautiful, the ones of them with their bodies naked. I was happy that when they showed the genitalia, it was at a distance. It wasn't up close. And to me, it just shows, why are we so ashamed of bodies as a society when there's really nothing wrong with anybody's figure, but really it's just like, as a painting, if you went to the National Gallery, if you went anywhere, you'd be like, what a beautiful oil painting, what great stroke. And that's how I felt like it. I didn't find it that sexual.
Yeah, I think it wore off, especially like over the film.
They definitely made it beautiful instead.
Yeah, and I think they kind of made it like the nakedness and the nudity like beautiful, but not in like a really overly artistic way. Like, you know, not like the soft like backlighting.
Yes,
and stuff. It was just very real. It was just like, yeah, this is somebody's body. It wasn't really about that. It was more about like the connection between the people.
It's almost like, what's more beautiful, the two bodies or the rain?
Yeah,
and the grass.
and, like,
it was like they both worked together.
Even in like the sex scenes and stuff, the bit that was meant to be like sexy or like erotic or something was like the communication between the two of them and like how they like responded to each other. And it wasn't necessarily like, there wasn't any like zoom ins on the actual body. It was like literally, here's a body, but then the thing that made like the sparks was like the way they talked to each other and the way they communicated, and the fact that she was obviously liberated to say what she wanted to. And I think it's so refreshing, especially considering the book was written so long ago, that was like the main topic. And I think the direction in the film was amazing, and the fact it was spot on in the fact that it got, there was nudity. Like, they are both obviously very attractive, physically attractive people, but like it wasn't like glorifying their bodies. It was like, it was glorifying them in the way like, they have naked bodies, they can feel the rain, it's great. But it was more about like the sex between the two people, rather than just like really hot actors having sex.
Especially Jack O'Connell with his, because he has a brilliant physique and he has abs and everything. But even despite his brilliant physique, it wasn't objectifying him.
Yeah. It
Whereas
wasn't
other films, when a man takes his top off,
so I'm like,
and it's like everyone's like Abela, and then it's like, no, but this wasn't like that. So even though he was in phenomenal shape, that wasn't the point of it. The direction with that, the lighting, it was kind of that one tone of lighting kind of throughout the film.
It wasn't like the candlelit flicker on the body. It was. I really like that. Normally you kind of want that in like a romantic film, but it was really nice in the fact that it wasn't.
It didn't hide
about that. Yeah.
It didn't hide the sex, because if you have sex in a film and the duvet's on the actress to cover her breasts, and fair enough, she probably doesn't want to show them, or the duvet's on the man so it doesn't show his bum or his bits. It's kind of a bit like, yes, people do have sex like that, but not all the time. It's very unrealistic. It kind of just, often it doesn't show the female pleasure because usually you just see the male back.
Yeah.
So you kind of just, it focuses on the man. But this time it was pretty much most of the time on Emma's face.
Yeah.
And the book, what was really, really revolutionary with the book is, to put it even more explicitly, it's about like men should please women sexually, and actually the goal of sex isn't for procreation or a man to orgasm, it's also for a woman to orgasm. And it was kind of, they never spoke about it in the film, but you could kind of see maybe the first time they had sex, she enjoyed it, but from Emma's acting, I got the impression we were supposed to think,
she wasn't fulfilled by it.
She wasn't fulfilled by it, but she was a bit shocked. It was very rough when Oliver came on top of her. It was very rough and it was a bit mechanical.
Yeah.
And then as the film went on, the sex got more like fluid and natural. And A, that's realistic, but B, that is kind of really how the message of the film is. You don't expect sex to change your life. What's actually changing her life is actually routinely she prioritizes sex, and she's like, I want to do it.
It's also the connection between the two
yes,
of them. Like when they started communicating, things got so much better.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I think that was the main message. It wasn't just about the sex.
It's not about like a woman having a sex life isn't really feminist because of the sex itself. It's more about that's something she wants to do. And she works on it, and it fulfills her because it's now part of her lifestyle. It's not, and it's the same with men also. It's not. It's a pro-sex film because they're sexually active, and it then becomes normalised, and then there just happen to be a couple who has sex all the time. Yeah.
And I think it's incredible the way that the message in the the film is like, and well, from the book, is still relevant today.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, we're all so much more aware of like female pleasure and like, you know, both people enjoying their sex life, whatever. But like, it's still not really shown that much in films. Like, again, maybe for the men as well, but it's not really shown as much. And the fact that this book was written ages ago, and it was trying to like spread that message, and that's still relevant to today. I just think it's really like just amazing how well it's travelled through time.
It's like we never get a message where men often go on voyages in films to find love and sex, but women never really hunt for sex. You don't really see that depicted a lot, but she kind of does. She looks around, she browses, which is why it's very.
She has a ponder.
It's why it's very funny that the husband is the one who directs that.
Yeah.
Because it's actually not from her. I think if she wasn't pushed, she wouldn't have pursued
sex. Yeah, she was shocked to start with.
But I think that's very true of women of that era, and perhaps even women now, that without some kind of like best friend or mother or someone being like, it's okay, because it's just that conditioning then was, it's wrong to have sex. Even in marriage, it's kind of a bit wrong to have sex, unless it's for children, you know. So she was pushed, she has sex. She maybe doesn't even enjoy it the first time, but she wants it, so she keeps going at it, and I think that's kind of the message of the film. And they even try anal in the, you know, in the film and in the book. It was subtext, but it was clear what it was about. So the anal was and it's something, and my roommate had joined me for the second half of this film, and he was like, what? It was
an
like,
interesting point to join.
Yeah, he was like, and it is interesting because we were saying there's so many feminist controversies right now with that type of sex, because basically in porn it's the most popular type of sex for men to watch, and apparently according to statistics most women don't enjoy it or haven't tried it yet. So for a film from the 20th century to have female anal, you know, like central to the film, it's revolutionary, and it kind of just shows you that it's really it's true that the media should depict role models, but that was kind of a role model of how to get into that anal, because if you think about it, the whole film is like, if you watch it, and I'm not being funny here, it is a good film to learn for history. But if you wanted to have a role model in a character, Connie's a great role model, because, as you say, she prioritises love, she prioritises herself, she stands up for herself, she's not prejudicial, but she also is like, it's not like she's, you never get the impression she's been pressured into having anal, or that it's a man watching a porn fantasy. That is something because they're both sexual beings, and to be frank, they have nothing else to do in their little village. Like, there's no TV then, there was no TikTok. So they both do that, and it's kind of a natural progression of their relationship. And I think that's a super important message to women and to men, that if you do sexual experiment, it should just be because of communication. As we said, the communication improved things. That's another tacit lesson. But also safe space, also security within a relationship, that now she feels more comfortable, and all that the film isn't. No one would go over that film being like, oh, it pressured me into doing this sex or that sex. But it does get. I think it's a great film to get rid of the stigma around enjoying sex, because it, as you say, it's still there.
And I think that's the aim of the book as well. So I think it's lovely that they've actually managed to like get that through again, however many years later. Like it's they've stuck to the point of the book, which is good, rather than just making it just about sex.
Yeah, and it's also love, and that's why I do think the plot of the film actually works more on love, because by the end of the film she wouldn't have moved for sex. No. She moved for love. You know, she got out because of love. And it also shows you that maybe sex is... It's okay to say, I want a relationship that prioritises sex, like hers. Because she was in a sexless marriage, and I bet she probably did love Clifford. And Clifford could have been amazing to her if he wasn't how he ended up being. But it does show you that, you know, with her being depressed and ill, a womanly kind of illness. That's how they kind of depict it in the film. It was like, that is clearly directly due to her lack of a sex life, and she's a young woman, and so it does show you that don't sacrifice on love or sex.
I feel like it was also just like physical touch as well, not even like sex. Like when they first met up at that cabin, she kind of just like took his hand or like
I
whatever
found that
she
funny.
did.
I laughed at that bit.
It's kind of just showing like she didn't. It wasn't even just the sex. Like she just wanted to feel like maybe the embrace of a
Yes.
man, just like to feel physically close to someone again, which obviously she hadn't had in a marriage for quite a long time.
That's really true, and you can see that the cottage is really cosy.
Mm.
Everyone's close together. That big house, and it is kind of an argument against buying a huge house, a huge mansion. Because
It's like when she hugged him as well, and she didn't
Yes.
let go, and he wasn't hugging her
Yeah.
back, but she still
No.
wouldn't let go. And then he was like, "Oh, it's like that then," and it's like, as in, he like, instantly knew that she hadn't had a hug, just a hug,
Yeah.
an
Yes.
innocent hug in ages, like, and it's so I agree, the physical touch situation